Hello, everyone. It's all
Hello.
working. It's all working. Hi, everyone. There is nothing like some excitement 2 minutes before the webinar when LinkedIn decides to have a glitch. So everything needed to be restarted. Welcome. And no more double views. Sorry about that. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar hosted by Lightrun, having some distinguished speakers from Priceline and Google. Before we get started, I would just like to give 1 or 2 more minutes for everyone to join, and then we'll do the introduction and get started. Meanwhile, Nathen, if you have anything cool to share, be my guest.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I do have something fun to share. Maybe some questions. Some things for you to think about while we're waiting for everyone to join. Like, what are some benefits your team would realize if your build times were cut in half?
And if you have any comments on these questions, feel free to reply either via comments in this LinkedIn Live webinar or any other way that you like, even in the Zoom chat. But feel free to engage in these very cool questions. So Nathen, thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's get started. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Eran Kinsbruner. I'm part of the Lightrun developer observability team, and I'm excited to have with me Dan Sternfeld from Priceline, Nathen, Harvey, and Amanda Lewis from Google DORA, and Google Cloud. Before we get started, maybe let's do a short round of introductions. Starting with you, Dan.
Oh, sure. Hi, my name is Dan Sternfeld. I have the title of Distinguished Engineer. That's a mouthful. It means I've been at Priceline since 2005, mostly on the front end. Technology has changed a lot in the almost 19 years that I've been here. And I'm excited to be here to talk with my esteemed colleagues here about the advances in DORA metrics.
Thank you. Nathen?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nathen Harvey. I lead up DORA here at Google Cloud, and I'm really excited to be here today. Thanks so much for bringing us all together on. I'm really excited to share some of what we're seeing and learn some lessons right along with you.
Great. And Amanda?
Hi, I'm Amanda Lewis. I'm on the DORA advocacy team, and I lead up our DORA community of practice, and really excited to be here and be a part of this discussion.
Thank you so much, everyone. So before we dive into the full discussion, I wanted to maybe start with both of you, Amanda and Nathen, and reveal a few of the latest findings that you have from the Google DORA research of 2023. So if you want to take us through what you are able to observe.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'd love to do that. So just really quickly on DORA. DORA is a research program that's been running for over a decade now. And this research program really looks at how do teams get better at delivering and operating software. What does that look like? What does it look like to be part of that team? What does it look like for the technologies and the processes that you use and so forth? So I'm over here at Dora.dev, and I wanted to give you a little recap of our latest findings, which, as you mentioned, were published in 2023 in our State of DevOps report, the Accelerate State of DevOps report. So to help me out here, I'm just going to jump over to research and then click on 2023 here. And this actually gives us like a nice one-pager summary of the report. So I'll just cover it very quickly. So first and foremost, DORA has always looked at 4 key measures for software delivery performance. Those measures are measures of both throughput, how long and how frequently do you update production, and then stability. When you do update production, does it work the way that you expect? Or when it doesn't, how quickly can you recover from that? And so in 2023, we looked across that as well. We also looked at a couple of other different facets of a team, more than just their software delivery performance. But what we found was that the teams that were getting the best performance overall were teams that were pretty well-balanced teams. They had high team performance, they had low burnout, the individuals on those teams had high job satisfaction, and all of this led to great organizational performance. One of the biggest findings from this year was that focusing on the user of your systems is paramount. It's something that really drives improvement. You can see the numbers right here on the screen: 40% higher organizational performance, 20% higher job satisfaction when you're focusing on the user. But what does it mean to actually focus on the user? Well, first and foremost, it means understanding who the user of the system or the application that you're building is. That user might be a coworker. Let's say, for example, you're on a platform engineering team. The users of your system are developers within your organization. That user may also be a customer of your organization. Let's say your Priceline is an example. Hi, I'm a customer. I want to book some travel. I'm the user. So would you focus on me? I know that you really do. But those teams that are focused on the users, you can see, get really great results. Now, there were other key findings that I just want to cover. There are 5 of them. I'll go through them very quickly. First and foremost, artificial intelligence. Well, you know, one of the things that we found with AI in 2023, actually, let's just remember, that was 2023. That was so yesterday. We're already into 2024, and AI just continues to dominate lots and lots of conversations in what we're doing. But what we were able to see last year was that, first, teams that are bringing on AI, it tended to have a really a positive impact on the well-being of people on those teams. This makes good sense. I'm an engineer. I want to play with new stuff that's fun. Getting to work with AI means I'm more engaged in my job. Maybe there's some excitement with that new tool. What we haven't seen yet, is that introduction of AI actually flowing through to things like organizational performance and software delivery performance. But don't worry, we're digging even deeper this year into AI, which actually you can go take the DORA survey right now. More about that in a minute. But we have much deeper questions into your experience with AI. The next thing that we found, top key finding number 2, is culture. Culture is foundational. It's foundational to all of this actually working. We found that teams that are performance-oriented, they have a generative culture. They have 30% higher organizational performance, and they see higher levels of job security and a 61% reduction in burnout. Good for the organization, good for the people on the team. Culture really matters. In fact, it doesn't matter what tools and processes you have in place. If your culture is fighting against it, it's going to be really difficult to make improvements. Next up is documentation. Around DORA, we like to say documentation is like sunshine. It is that key element that really helps technical and process practices take root and then really thrive and flourish and flow all the way through to organizational outcomes. So I know everyone understands the importance of documentation and understands it's a thing that maybe we can put on the back burner. We have evidence through our research, through years of research actually, that show how important documentation is. And actually, if you look at this year's and 2022 and 2021, all of those reports give you some insights into how important documentation is, and more importantly, how can you improve it on your own team. Next up, key finding number 4, flexible infrastructure with cloud. Look, we know that teams with flexible infrastructures tend to do better. What we also were able to demonstrate through our data this year was that clouds help teams adopt a flexible infrastructure. But just like we've seen in years previous, simply using the cloud isn't enough. You really need to take advantage of the flexibility that cloud offers. And so we saw that a public cloud leads to a 22% increase in infrastructure flexibility, and then that flexible infrastructure leads to higher organizational performance. Key finding number 5, distributing work fairly. Look, our teams are made up of many different people from many different backgrounds, many different types of people on our team with different levels of experience and different areas of focus. It is important that we make a commitment as a team to distribute work fairly so that not all, sort of non-promotable work falls on a certain person or a certain group of people within our team. It's really, really an important thing. Oh, and I'm going to give you a 6th key insight that's not on this slide, but I just want to share it with you really quickly. We found that teams with faster code reviews tended to have about a 50% better software delivery performance. So in other words, code review is oftentimes a bottleneck within your software delivery process, and improving that can show some real gains. So that's the quick update on what happened in 2023 and what we reported in 2023. You can go over to dora.dev and you can actually download the report from there. You can see all of the questions that we asked in the survey, but more important than those questions, I would encourage you to take this year's DORA survey. The primary reason I encourage teams to take this survey, though, is so that you have a moment to reflect on how you and your team are doing right now. Using this survey as a tool to help drive conversations, you may very well come up with some ideas around what you want to improve in your quests to get better at getting better. So, Eran, back to you. That's the quick overview of the 2023 report.
This is amazing. I strongly recommend everyone to go download the 2023 report, but most importantly, make an impact on the next one through the survey. So thank you for sharing these insights. I can tell you, without giving too much teasers, some of these points from the findings are tied into some of the questions during this webinar. So let's dive in, and we'll start with the following question. And when it comes to reducing MTTR, which is also part of the DORA metrics, and other key developer productivity metrics, what are some of the best practices that you recommend to adopt? And we'll start with you, Dan. Being at Priceline, what do you adopt? What do you see as the best practice from a productivity perspective, reduction in MTTR and the likes?
Thank you very much, Eran, and thank you, Nathen. I think a lot of what you said definitely hits home for me. And specifically at Priceline. I'm glad you mentioned both Gen AI and culture. I want to talk about culture for a minute, just because that culture of innovation is really important to us, along with that culture of accountability. And that speaks to everything that you need to improve your holistic SDLC, because that's really what you have to look at. You can't just look at MTTR in a vacuum. As far we're looking at improving qualitatively and quantitatively everything that we do along the entire SDLC. So during design and development stages, yes, we're definitely leveraging generative AI. We have developer tools in place that help people generate code faster. I'm so glad you said something about code review, because that's a personal passion of mine. And yes, a little bit every day is certainly something that's going to help move things forward. And you can certainly see the impact on timely code review in improving our processes. Then when it comes to MTTR, including that culture of accountability, right? What we want to see is an incident response posture that engages teams, and then following up with a real kind of blameless RCA process so that you can get to specific truths about what went wrong and how you can improve. All that stuff is vital to what we do at Priceline. And without kind of practices and procedures in place that help enable those things for our development teams, we'd certainly be back where we were before our cloud migration. The landscape has changed a lot over the past few years. It's important to have good tools, but it's more important to have that culture where people are accountable for the results that they're putting out there, and remediating failures, keeping that resolution posture intact. So that's what I've got to say about that. Thank you.
Sure. Nathen, Amanda, from a best practice perspective, specifically to this MTTR metric, do you see some real life examples, best practices that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, I think one of the things we see, and I kind of heard it in Dan's, explanation of what's happening kind of in real life on the ground, is that when, DORA is looking at an application, when we say team, we're not talking about just the engineering team, we're not just talking about the QA team, it's all of those roles that come together to deliver that application. So when we're talking about MTTR, the entire team plays a role in that. And so communicating that, having discussions about it, and having that blameless culture so that you can come together, because maybe part of what's going to impact that maybe it is in code review, right? There could be other places within and different roles that have an impact. So I think making sure that it's a blameless culture and that there's communication across roles so that everyone's working together and owning the success of that together.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to that idea of a blameless culture and really having that good incident posture, incident response posture, I think this really gets to, again, that sort of culture that underpins a lot of what we're talking about. And in particular, the phrase that we've been using a lot lately, and we've borrowed it from other communities, is learning from incidents. And that from is very important. It's not about learning about your incidents. Oh, we had an incident, let's go learn about it. But actually, what can we learn from it? And there's a whole LFI, or learning from incidents, community that we're starting to pick up some language from around that really talks to how do you run reliable systems. And then, of course, the other thing that DORA has found year in and year out, the way to improve those software delivery metrics is by shipping smaller changes and getting feedback faster. And so if you want to reduce your time to restore a service from maybe a failed deployment, if it's a small deployment, it's easier to reason about that thing. If you're deploying once or twice a year, you're probably putting a lot of things into that deployment. And when something small goes wrong, it may be very difficult to roll back that small thing. So oftentimes what ends up happening, I know I've lived this myself, you roll everything back. I remember earlier in my career where we would deploy every 2 weeks, but it was 6 or 8 different features that went out every 2 weeks, and invariably one of those features failed. And so in order to recover very quickly, we rolled everything back, which was great because service was working again. But it did mean that the commitments we'd made around those 6 or 8 features, they were always being pushed out a little bit further, to the point where frankly, our business partners started to lose a little bit of trust in us. When we said we're going to ship something on Tuesday, what they heard was we're going to ship something on Thursday. And they heard that because they were right. That's actually what happened in practice.
I would like to dovetail on this, even though I'm the host. I just published this morning, honestly, a newsletter about exactly what you were saying. I should have discussed it with you, Amanda and Nathen, and use this LFI because and the blameless or the culture thing, because what I was talking about there is when something happens, when an incident happens in production, and yes, you are able with the right tools to mitigate and fix the issue, it's not the end of the road. You need to feedback or close the loop back to your other engineers, your quality engineering team, so they can understand what happened, what was the root cause. Maybe they need to build new test cases, test scenarios to conclude the test coverage, to maximize the test coverage, so this incident does not repeat in, I don't know, 6 or 7 iterations in the future. So I really connect to your point of view, and I might be adding this LFI to my newsletter because I should have known about it earlier. It's exactly what I was talking about this morning, so spot on. Thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to the next question. And the next one is, what are some of the key challenges within Priceline? Back to you, Dan, especially, in your domain of, travel and e-commerce, some challenges that you see, day in and day out, zooming in just to your landscape, to your own world when it comes to DORA metrics, troubleshooting production issues, shifting left observability, these kind of things?
Sure. That's a broad question, but I will try my best, Eran. I'll try to focus on one particular area. So for those of you unfamiliar with Priceline.com, we're an online travel agency. That's how we refer to ourselves. We allow you to book rental cars, hotel room nights, flights, bundle them together, and some destination services. As you probably have figured out, Priceline doesn't own any airlines. So we have to work with suppliers. I'm going to talk a little bit about the flights product because I think it presents some of the most interesting challenges, right? So when you come to Priceline and do a search, we have to reach out to our suppliers to find airlines that fit your search parameters. And there can be, I think we're up to 45 suppliers we could be searching, and some of those are aggregators, right? And so we have to fan out those requests to many, many different suppliers. At the same time, we have this concept at Priceline, it's really an industry concept, the look to book ratio, right? So when you search for travel, right, you do a search and then eventually you successfully submit an offer. Airlines, GDS supplier, a global distribution system, our suppliers care greatly about how many searches we're doing, right? Sometimes they can be expensive. And really, they want to see a ratio of bookings for those lookings, right? So we have to keep all of our suppliers happy across all of these channels. And we also have to return flight results to you in a timely fashion. So in order to achieve that, our flights product has undergone the microservices revolution, right? We have lots and lots of applications in production performing different functions to get that aggregate supply in front of customers. You can imagine how many different suppliers can fail. Business rules need to be applied to know how many different airlines we can show and things like that. And any number of things like that can go wrong in production, right? So we need really, really good observability tools to be able to see in production and also in non-production where supply permits, right? Everything about the landscape as to why this result was shown to this customer. And then we want to improve that. So we're also A/B testing those results. With all of those things in play, we need something that tells us exactly what the customer is seeing to get as close to them as possible. And because all of those different things can go wrong, you need a really robust observability tool suite in order to accomplish that.
Hey, but coming back to some of the findings, Dan, from the 2023 report, we said focus on the user is one of the things that matters. It sounds like you're doing that, but I have a question. Does your user care that one of those backends was down?
No, the user does not. The business cares greatly, right? So we want to make sure we're giving customers the best possible product on the shelf. So they care to an extent in that if we don't show enough supply, then maybe we can't marry that customer with the flight that would make them the happiest, that would allow them to experience the moments that matter on their vacation, right? So you can hear the language that I'm using here.
Mm-hmm.
It's really top to bottom. That's the CEO's language that I'm using, that we really care about the customer's experience.
That's super cool.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Dan. And dovetailing to that question, Nathen, when you started this webinar, you said DORA research is over a decade now. And
yes,
Dan was just talking about, building all this sophisticated online platform with microservices. And we are seeing, over the past few years, the transition towards cloud native and serverless and microservices and what we call remote and distributed workloads. Did you see any spikes up or down in your findings throughout these years up until 2023 as organizations were adopting these technologies but still were trying to improve their DORA metrics, MTTR and the likes? Have you seen this kind of spikes as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And one of the things that we in our research tend to stay away from are platform or program specific questions. We aren't going to ask you, for example, which cloud provider are you using? Are you deploying your microservices into a Kubernetes environment? We want to stay sort of out of that and really talk about the capabilities that teams have. And so, but to that end, in the 2024 survey, so this year's survey that's open now, you should go take it. One of the areas that we're looking at and trying to assess is this idea of platform engineering. How does platform engineering impact overall developer productivity, developer experience, and so forth? And I would say that one of the benefits of DORA is that our research and our findings are broadly applicable. So if you're a team that's about to take on a platform engineering journey, one question that you might very well be asked is, how do we prove the value of platform engineering? How do we know that it's working? And this is where something like DORA's software delivery metrics can come right back in and provide some guardrails for you. Well, let's take the 2 or 3 applications that, maybe they're managing everything on their own right now. Let's get a sense for their software delivery metrics today. Let's find some constraints or bottlenecks that they have and build those into the platform. And then let's measure how are they doing once they're on the platform. And so DORA really encourages this process of continuous learning and continuous improvement. So set a baseline, find a constraint, do something to alleviate that constraint, rinse and repeat the process. And so I think what we're hoping to find this year is, how is that working for platform engineering teams? Is it working? Can we see that showing up in our data? And one of the things, of course, that we want to avoid is measuring things like how many people in your organization have the title platform engineer, right? That doesn't necessarily tell us a whole lot. We care much more about the capabilities that your teams have and the outcomes that they're able to achieve.
That's a great point. Amanda, do you have any comments on that as well?
I was just going to say that I think the other interesting thing over the years that we've seen when we talk about, cloud native, or we're not asking maybe specifically those questions, but as we've worked with teams or we talk with the community, that there are absolutely, the cloud can really help you improve your DORA metrics. But we have seen teams that are on mainframes that have used and improved their capabilities and are doing better than someone who's built an application completely cloud native. So I think that it really does come down to those technical culture and process capabilities. And at the same time, once you can kind of improve your skills there and you've got that spirit of continuous improvement, moving to the cloud will help you improve those. But it isn't kind of a magic wand, I think.
Sure thing. And by the way, what I'm seeing, from both Lightrun customers, but also from other colleagues in the industry, I think I also wrote an article about it. So platform engineering is not an if, it's already kind of a reality. People are adopting it, organizations are adopting it. But what I do see is that the adoption is done from different reasons and different objectives. Not everyone kind of chooses to go with the platform engineering just for maybe the agility and the streamline of tool set within the organization. Some are looking at solving other challenges, better, you said guardrails, so better control over the entire engineering team, so you know what everyone is using and you can control it. Maybe it's even more cost effective. So I'm hearing different, not pros and cons, but different objectives that are driving the adoption toward platform engineering. So I will definitely be waiting for the next survey, the 2024, and see what people are actually saying about that.
Yeah, actually, when we were at Google Cloud Next just a few weeks ago, we had a platform engineering roundtable, and one of the organizations there, they happened to work at a financial institution, and they were from the platform engineering team. Of course, I can't tell you which, but they were from the platform engineering team, and they shared with the group that one of the ways that they help encourage new applications to get onto the platform is that they've built in a lot of the compliance controls and audit controls right into the platform. So think about this from a developer perspective. Probably the least favorite week that you have is the week that the auditor is sitting next to you every year or twice a year, whatever that is. Can we make that terrible week be easy and fun, or just go away so I don't have to think about it? If the platform provides those controls, that's a really great example of, again, that platform engineering team focusing on the needs of their users. Let's go find something that's painful. Let's try to take away that pain. And in doing so, with the platform, they're able to scale those controls across the entire organization. So it's a huge organizational benefit, a huge developer experience benefit, and probably a huge end customer benefit, because now we know that they're following those compliance policies much closer, and they have a much easier audit perspective for those.
Very cool. Very interesting. Moving to the next question, and Dan, I think you mentioned earlier that since you are serving in real time so many happy customers, it's important to have an observability platform that helps you see what's going on in real time across the different microservices that are running in production. So can you share what is the developer observability experience within the Priceline engineering team, and did the introduction of a developer observability within Priceline help boost some of the Google DORA metrics in your team as well?
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. So I did mention the challenges that the flights team is facing with these aggregated suppliers. So Lightrun, unsurprisingly, is one of those developer observability tools that's made an impact at Priceline. The ability for our flights engineers to be able to put a pseudo breakpoint in production and see the quality of data, the specific values that are coming through, that's been invaluable for solving some of these supplier issues for sure. We, of course, at Priceline also believe in the IDP, right? The internal developer platform is something that's taken a few different shapes over the 19 years that I've been here. I'm quite fortunate nowadays. Today, I sit on a team called User Experience Platform. And within our group, we have a Scrum team dedicated to developer experience. And we're building up our internal sites and tools to help make it easier for developers to understand what's going on in the running environment, some homegrown tools for that, and also for making it easier, faster to get new applications into production, something that's really important. If you're adopting a microservice architecture, you get new apps springing up all the time to solve real problems. But belt and suspenders, we have quite a few tools that you would categorize as observability tools. There's Lightrun, of course. There's stuff they're doing with our internal tools. We also use application performance monitoring tools, attaching those to our incident response tools so that we have a whole kind of robust picture of what's going on in the environment. Every single one of those has saved our bacon once or twice a week, it seems. So these are important tools to keep things moving forward, for sure.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. So moving to the next question, and when we think about internal advocacy and developer experience, which we talk a lot about when we look at the Google DORA research report, how do we help team see and care about these metrics and tools? Nathen, do you like to take this one?
Sure, I can give it a start, and then Amanda can maybe fill in the bits that I miss, because I'm sure to miss some bits. I think when we really start thinking about how do we get teams to care about the metrics, I think the most important thing is to understand what the metrics are there for. Those metrics are there to start a conversation, to guide improvement. And I think the best way to get teams using those metrics together is to just start having those conversations. Just you don't even necessarily need a dashboard to tell you what your deployment frequency is. As a team, you can ask the question, what's our deployment frequency? As I said before, some teams deploy twice a year. If you're deploying twice a year or even twice a quarter, you probably don't need a dashboard for that. You can count that on one hand, that. But the answer of how often are you deploying is not the end goal. The end goal is, well, how do we improve that? Is there an opportunity for us to increase that frequency without compromising the stability of those applications and those releases? And that's what DORA shows us over the years, is that speed and stability tend to move together. They aren't trade-offs of one another. And so that's certainly a thing. And then when it comes to driving that internal advocacy, I think whether you're a platform team or trying to roll out a new tool within your organization, look, success breeds success. And if you're the owner of the tool or building out the platform, you're probably a good spokesperson for it. But the better spokesperson is the application that just moved onto your platform and is having a brilliant experience with it, or even a terrible experience with it. let them share what they're experiencing, and you sort of give them a place where they can amplify that. We've seen that this is sort of a repeated story over the history of DORA, whether it's moving to the cloud or infrastructure as code or better observability. It all starts on one or two teams who lean in. Oftentimes leaning in means hackathons and just trying to figure out this new thing, just trying to play with it. But we have to give that initial set of teams the autonomy and the time and space to actually do that. And then as they see success, we see communities of practice as a great way to sort of expand that knowledge and drive adoption across the organization. Pitfalls or sort of anti-patterns are when the executive comes in and says, we just spent $10 million on this tool. Everyone is going to use this tool starting tomorrow. That's a much harder sell.
Right.
I think I would add that, and I agree, Nathen, it's about the conversation, that when we have metrics, and even if there's a dashboard, it should really foster conversation. But I think so often we see it fosters fear. So I think that from an internal advocacy perspective, it's about building trust and trust with your team and helping them understand why we're looking at those metrics and answering those questions and maybe tweaking what you're measuring based on the needs of that team, so that it is helping them be able to get better and have those conversations, instead of, I guess, in the same way, if we just introduce this tool, now everyone go use it. We do see, we've just introduced this metric, now everyone go measure it. And if we don't understand how it's being used, especially upward, then it fosters fear instead of conversation. And so really focusing on building that trust, being very transparent about why we're measuring what we're measuring and how teams can use those measures to improve their well-being and the impact of their applications.
Very good. Dan, you have any comments on this question?
Well, I'll just echo everything that's just been said. The measurement itself is the starting point for a conversation. It's a great way to think about it. And adjusting those measurements for the reality of on the ground, for what's important about throughput and resolution to your team. That's going to make those metrics that much more impactful to the people being measured.
Definitely. So I did a spoiler alert earlier when Nathen was talking about the findings of 2023, and one of the points I was very active in listening to your session, to your speech, Nathen. You mentioned Gen AI or AI, and there is no webinar or article which makes sense without mentioning or using this term. But to be serious for a second, is Gen AI, especially when we look at developer observability, developer productivity, Google DORA metrics, is it a good thing, a bad thing? Is it taking us to a better place with regards to measuring the developer experience and developer productivity? Actually, it's not just measuring, actually living it, especially when you see tools like, Copilot and Code Whisperer, and every day you hear about a new platform. It's not just about code generation, but it's also about, looking at security vulnerabilities and things like that. So there are obviously pros and cons, but just zooming in the developer observability, the developer productivity, the DORA metrics, is Gen AI going to drive us to a better place based on what you found in 2023 and looking at 2024 and beyond? We can start with you, Nathen, and do the round table if you like.
Sure, I'm happy to start. And so what I can say definitively is what we found in 2023, slight improvement to well-being of teams, no real impact on organizational performance or even software delivery performance yet. But in practice, and what I'm seeing out in the field today and what we're hoping to learn through our survey this year, is that there are places where AI is definitely helping. I think it is important to remember that we are all collectively, not just us here and those watching, but the entire world, we're learning how to best interact with AI right now and what its strengths and what its weaknesses are. And it's really important that we not throw away the lessons of the past. If you want to improve your DORA metrics, the three best ways to do so: ship smaller features, get faster feedback, and build a climate of learning. Okay, so if you want to use AI to inject and improve those numbers, Well, use AI in sort of some dedicated ways where you know there's a bottleneck and it has the potential of alleviating that bottleneck. Get feedback faster. AI is very, very confident in every answer it gives you. That doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it wrong, but you have to have ways of assessing that so that you can get that feedback. And then that climate for learning, I think, is fundamental. And this goes back to, you know, let's go have a hackathon. Let's go figure out what can we do with AI. And I would encourage everyone, listen to your teams and listen to your teammates. Everyone on the team has a different idea about how to best use AI today. Give that idea a moment to flourish and to grow and see what comes of that. I think that's the important piece right now.
To you, Amanda?
Well, I think that, is it good or is it bad? I think with any new or any even existing thing that we roll out, right, could have a good or bad. But for me, I'm incredibly optimistic about the potential it may help us improve things that we know we should do, but we don't always do. So in that same presentation that Nathen was giving at the beginning, we talked about documentation and how it's like sunshine. And we all know we should do better at it. But I will say, so that kind of a hypothesis I have about where this, you know, Gen AI might help us is when I'm using Gemini Code Assist, when I'm giving it a comment about what I'm looking for it to help me with, it's very detailed and very, like, anybody else could come along and read what I wrote and understand what I was trying to write. Where normally the comment I would have put in there would have been much shorter, and anybody who came in after me would have no idea what I was trying to do potentially. And they would spend a significant amount of time looking at my code, trying to understand my thought process. So I think that it has the ability to help us reduce our cognitive load and improve some of these areas that we know we want to be better at and we should be better at. But it'll, if we can build it into our workflow where we don't have to think about it, it might be really great.
Dan, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm not going to disagree and say that generative AI is a fad that will go away anytime soon, for sure. Generative AI is definitely a good thing from a software development perspective. I like Amanda's comments about where it can assist her today. I'm really thinking about where it's going in the future. And I think the important things that we need to be able to do with generative AI is really measure its impact. As Nathen was saying, we're not seeing those results quantitatively or clearly in the DORA surveys yet. I'm pretty sure that is coming. I agree with Nathen, but what thing do we need to measure? What series of things do we need to measure to understand the impact that it's having? Priceline developers have a generative AI coding solution integrated with their IDEs today. And when we think about measuring its success, right, we shouldn't really just be looking at the auto completion of a coding prompt, right? We should be sure that's a convenient way to count the number of developer person hours saved. But how much do you trust that? And really, the thing that matters is code that sticks, right? There are going to be cases where generative AI is generating a lot of code that gets rewritten every 3 days by somebody else also generating on top because their code didn't quite do what you wanted it to do, or it wasn't flexible or extensible enough to adapt to your use case because it was bringing up something very specific to the solution that was required originally. So there's a long way to go before we can say definitively where the value is going to be. I think you're going to find value in auto completion and making as that iterative process improves, as the models get better, but also in the sorts of, things that we might think of as overhead now. Certainly not documentation, that's very important, but also sort of project planning tasks and things that you wouldn't necessarily right off the bat think of generative AI as a solution to. So I'm really excited to see where it's going. It's very, very early days right now. We're doing what we can to try to measure qualitatively and quantitatively the impact of these tools. but we're on the precipice of something, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
You know, I think another thing that's really important here with this sort of moment of AI, for years we've been talking about cultural change and cultural transformation, and like, you don't get better at culture just by thinking about culture. The way that your culture improves is usually through changing how you work and the tools that you're using. So we have this moment now where everyone is AI, AI, AI. How do we as practitioners leverage that moment to help push the cultural change that we've wanted all along? And I think that, to me, that's the most fascinating and exciting thing about bringing in this new tool that is kind of sweeping across the industry. Everyone's going to try something different. That means we're all learning. Let's all lean into that learning together and use that to help transform the culture within our organization at the same time it's transforming the technologies that we're using.
I love
And it was,
go ahead, sorry.
oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, Dan, it was great to hear how you're thinking about measuring it as well. We, the DORA community, we run a monthly thing called Metric Monday, where we have a lean coffee discussion about metrics. And this past Monday, we had some really good conversations about how do we measure the impact of Gen AI in our developer tools, and how do we think about that. And there was definitely that kind of falls in line where it's both the qualitative and the quantitative, but how important it is that we are thinking about that and kind of keeping that in mind as we're experimenting and moving forward with it. So I love that.
Cool. Thank you, Amanda. I may join you for lean coffee one day.
And I think
That'd be
just to add on top of all these great comments about Gen AI, I think that a lot of the things we talked about, culture and measuring and stuff like that is good, but we also need to understand that these tools that are being used around, like Gen AI tools, Code Whisper and the likes, are supporting developers in their journey. They are creating X amount of lines of code, as Dan mentioned, sometimes even more. And I would actually look back at what Dan was talking about. Every few days, this code changes. And the code is not living in a silo. You have CI/CD pipelines, you have a software testing cycle, you have a deployment schedule. So we also need to be mindful into how these tools integrate into the existing processes, so they, A, do not disrupt anything, B, are not adding regressions and quality issues, because this is the code that you as a developer didn't really wrote, going back to Nathen and the documentation importance. So sometimes this code is not even well documented. So if something breaks, it might take you longer time to go into this X amount of lines of code to understand what was the root cause and who added or which tools. Some, as I mentioned, some organizations are using more than one code generation tool, right? So there can be a lot of complexities on top of the good benefits that Gen AI is bringing to the table. And yes, time will tell us, it's not that Gen AI will go and disappear. It's actually going to evolve and be much better, but it will take few, I'd say, lesson learned, LFIs and things like that, I think, for everyone to be able to mature and adopt these kind of tools to the best benefit. And then we'll see also the impact on this developer productivity, the developer experience, and obviously the agility, the frequency of deploying code to production. Moving towards I think one of the last questions for today's webinar, and I know, Nathen and Amanda, we have the survey of 2024 live on the website, but based on everything that we have discussed here, talking about developer productivity, developer experience, LFI, Gen AI, platform engineering, and IDP, where do you see the Google DORA research changing over the next few years? I'm not talking 5 and 10, I'm talking 2 or 3 years, with everything evolving around us. Do you see any changes, additional new metrics that you're going to add, that you can expose? Amanda, if you want to start.
I'll let Nathan, I thought he came off mute.
All right.
I mean, I think I'll just,
go ahead.
I'll just say, and then I'll pass it to you. But I think that, in the spirit of it, it's really about, building that practice of continuous improvement. And I think the technology around us might change, but I think over the years we've seen those capabilities have really stayed the same. And so I don't, Nathen might disagree with me, we'll see, but I don't think there's going to be a significant change about the approach. And as far as metrics goes, I don't know what the research will show us in the future. But I think that just continuing to work together as a community, I mean, we've got, the global community comes together and responds to the survey. So then we can continue to work together to identify how teams are getting better. And I think that will just continue into the future. Nathen?
Yeah, plus one to that. I think that, if like I said earlier, DORA's been running for more than a decade now. And if we go back a decade and look at the tools that we were using, the processes, the approaches that teams were taking, we identified some capabilities that would help them. I have to admit, I was just literally last night reading the 2013 State of DevOps report, and I was underlying things that I would say today. And so there's, there's a little bit of hope and maybe a little bit of worry in that it's been over a decade and we still have to say these same things because we're still learning these lessons. But I think the really important thing, though, is that DORA has proven to be, it withstands the test of time, I would say. It is broadly applicable. It has given us this good framework that we can use to drive that continuous improvement. But at the end of the day, that framework is meaningless without the community. And so Amanda's mentioned a couple of times, if you aren't already, head over to dora.community. Join that community because it's together as practitioners, as leaders, as researchers, that this is how we're all figuring out what does the future of us look like. And I think that beyond anything else, we will have a deeper dive into the human aspects of delivering, operating, building technology and software for organizations and for their customers. So I think that the developer experience is only going to continue to be forefront as we continue digging into what is your experience like today and how can we help you improve.
Awesome, appreciate it. And as mentioned, everyone who is listening, feel free to be part of 2024 survey, and we'll see how, maybe in our next webinar that maybe covers the next research, what findings we will see back then. And just before we wrap up, Dan, do you have any final comments about where do you see your engineering group, in next year or so with everything that we have discussed here, platform engineering, Gen AI, sophisticated observability solutions? Do you have like a vision for your organization?
Oh boy, that's a question to close on. So here's what I'll say. I've been at Priceline for a very long time. That's I could say anomalous a little bit in the industry, I would say, right? That people tend to hop around a lot these days. The number one reason I give why I tell people I'm still at Priceline is because it's really never the same job for more than 6 months straight. The industry is changing so rapidly, right? I'm not going to be able to predict what the next big thing is. We see something on the horizon now. And back to what Nathen was saying about the validity of the points in the report from 10 years ago, right? Just like code that maybe hasn't been deployed in a long time, but is very stable, right? It represents some kind of core and fundamental truths about software engineering that do exist, that we should be leveraging to better understand what's going on in our environment, what's going on with our teams. And I don't see that fundamentally changing in any meaningful way. We're still going to have group. I'm glad there's a DORA advocacy group with this kind of lifespan, because it does show that, when you have this continuous map of this landscape over time, you see that some things are just always going to be true. So the real, if there's one area that seems the most nascent right now, it's really figuring out how to turn qualitative information into quantitative, actionable steps to improve your processes. And as far as measurements go, DORA is right up there with solutions that solve that particular problem. So that's where I see us going. More reliance on groups like this and more thinking about qualitatively, how are our engineers doing? How are our teams doing?
Thank you for that. Dan, you survived the question pretty well. So sorry
Thank
for
you.
putting me on the spot. So with that, dear friends, I'd like to wrap up today's webinar. We will be sharing, of course, the recording with the audience. And I would like to thank both, actually all of you online, but definitely Dan, Nathen, Amanda, for sharing your real life insights. I'm sure everyone who was either live on the webinar or will watch it on demand will appreciate it. And I look forward to maybe engaging with you in the future and learn some more insights. But for today, thank you so much for joining and sharing your insights.
Thank you
Thank you
for
for having
organizing, Eran.
My pleasure. Thank you
So
so
much.
much.
Thank you for talking to me, Nathen, Amanda. This was great.
Thank you. It was a lot
That's
of
great.
fun.
Thank you, Dan.
Bye-bye, guys.
Take care, folks.